The Game of Zen explores the often overlooked ways in which professional, personal, and spiritual growth are interrelated. We dive deep into the life teachings of the Buddha and the mindfulness practices of Zen, revealing how they can help us dramatically expand our possibilities for wholehearted work, life, and play.
Hello, and welcome to a new episode of the Game of Zen podcast. My name is Scott Berman, checking in from Philadelphia, PA, and I'm here with my good friend and sensei, Paul. What's going on in Boulder today, Paul?
Hey, Scott, good to be here with you today. Well, we've got our regular April snowfalls have come in, to Colorado. April's the number 2 precipitation month behind February in Colorado. So, unbeknownst to newcomers to the area, it's very common to get several fairly major snowfalls through the course of April. So we had one of those over the weekend. So we've got, tulips blooming and all these nice flowers, and then they get covered with this dusting of snow. It's actually really beautiful. I had a retreat this past Saturday. We have monthly retreats here outside Boulder, as you know, and this one was what we call an enter here retreat. So it's for newcomers to Zen, newcomers to meditation. We don't do our regular, 6 hours of meditation through the day, but instead it's about 2 hours spaced out in 20-minute chunks, really accessible. And we had a nice group. We had 20 plus people, a number of people coming in from out of state to join us for that retreat. So it went really well, and I'm feeling pretty energized and good. How about you?
Oh, things are good here. The weather's actually been great. We're finally getting into spring. We got Sixers playoffs versus the Knicks right now, Sixers-Knicks. So we're down 1-0, but we'll see what happens. But yeah, things are going great. And I'm glad you brought up the retreat, actually, because today's episode is about groups and communities and sanghas. And, there's a lot of different ways that we can do this practice. And the more that I've gotten to know you and the different things that you put together, the more I realize the power of community and bringing people together in spirituality. And so this is what today's episode is about. And I'd love to hear maybe talk about a Sangha to start with. Like, what is it and why is it important?
Yeah, it's super important. And Sangha is really the word that we just use to refer to the community. The group of practitioners originally is what it was. So those who were practicing certain practices together, following certain guidelines and practices together. You could say, our term for it might be an intentional community, one where people are kind of in line with their intention around how they're living life, right? And the Buddha, going all the way back, thousands of years, it's been identified how important it is to have a community of practitioners, whatever your practice may be, in order to grow in that practice, to develop. It's super important. Back in those days, thousands of years ago, there were a lot of people who did actually go off and they would meditate as hermits, or, isolated kind of people who just kind of do their own thing. And there's that image, of cartoons of like the guru who goes up into the mountains and just practices by themselves for a long time. But Buddhism actually represented a shift in spiritual inquiry, meditative inquiry, from that kind of model where just be, mostly you just kind of ascetically power through into new dimensions of consciousness, and instead recognize that no, actually a deeper consciousness can be achieved by being in a natural, organic, ordinary, even relationship with other human beings in a very natural way, albeit also dedicated to a depth of compassionate and insightful spiritual practice to go along with it. And when that, in that context, is what the Buddha identified, that's how, not only individuals, but the collective can raise their consciousness and become more wise and more compassionate.
I think it's interesting that, learning about how the Buddha started bringing people together. There was a small group and then it just got bigger and bigger. And Is that something that was kind of an original idea? Like, okay, let's just all gather together and hang out in the woods and do this, or did it sort of organically happen where people just started flocking to him, and then these communities were built?
It was more organic. Yeah, he headed out, once he felt he had something to offer. He didn't have a plan for what that was gonna look like, so he just went and he began living his life, and people started just being attracted to his message. In fact, the first people who were attracted to his message were those individual hermits that he had practiced with for 6 years.
Yeah.
And he first decided he was gonna, eat some good food and treat his body well instead of being an ascetic. They abandoned him. But then when he came back after having a really profound breakthrough experience, they realized the depth of his insight, and they were the first ones to join him. And they became his initial followers. And then my understanding is that he was itinerant, and he would just travel around to different cities, in India, and people would just be attracted to his teaching, and would take up with the whole community. So it became larger and larger, and would continue to kind of walk around.
I think it's fascinating too, since that time, which is about 2,500 years ago or so, that now there's all these different branches. And as Buddhism spread around the world, there's different. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on how it transpired. Like, apparently nothing was written down for a long time. It was just verbally exchanged, the Buddha's teachings. And then people started writing it down, and they had different interpretations. So how did the different paths of Buddhism, and tell us about some of them?
Yeah, well, it's really more of an emphasis, I would say. So different communities decided or were drawn to emphasize different aspects of the teachings and practices that the Buddha sort of initiated. And, if you look at the sutras, the original record of what the Buddha said and did, they're quite extensive. There's quite extensive trainings and teachings about, the psychology and how the mind works. There's certain practices that can be done. There's discussions of the Eightfold Path, right? All 8 aspects of the Eightfold Path. And we've done podcasts on that. So right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right understanding, it covers all these aspects of life. And there's a lot of different parts to it, you could say. And then, as is the way with us humans, people are drawn towards certain things, certain areas. So one school kind of focused on meditation. Now, Zen, is my lineage, that happens to be one which is really focused on meditation. Others are more focused on, say, scriptural study, really looking at the psychology and the teachings, the detailed teachings that came down through the Buddha and the teachers. So to look at that and to emphasize those. Some schools might emphasize service work. Okay, so they can do an engaged kind of work in the world. Some might have found, certain types of practices, say like more compassion practices or even devotional practices, right? There's branches of Buddhism that they have more like a prayerful aspect to them, where you're praying to these figures of the Buddha that you can visualize. And, Zen, for example, isn't like that. It doesn't have a strong devotional aspect or a bhakti, aspect. And some might have heard that Sanskrit word, that aspect to it. So there's these different aspects that people are drawn to based on their own, maybe archetypes, their own energies, their own interests. So it just takes on these different flavors. And so these different, you could say, sects, develop around those things. But the core, if you look at all Buddhist sects, the core is unitary. It's singular.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's cool. And there's also a lot of lists too. Everyone's got a list.
That's right.
A lot of lists and a lot to learn. So it's fascinating to just learn about the different sects. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on what the difference is between meditating by yourself or doing your own practice as opposed to being part of a group. What else do you think you get out of it?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's very alive for me, having done a meditation retreat with beginners. Um, so something happens when you're meditating in a group. You're kind of self-conscious in a way that actually supports you in your practice. If you're doing it by yourself, you're creating your own ground rules. You have less of a discipline, around, say, moving around or sneezing, or because it isn't impacting other people. But when you're sitting in a group, your awareness actually gets heightened. And that's what our practice is about. It's about heightening our awareness.
Hmm.
So you're conscious of more people around you, and you're conscious that they're conscious of you. So you can have you're tuned into that, to that dimension. It is absolutely the case that the augmentation, the amplification of awareness that happens in meditation is amplified by other people in the room. I mean, countless times, in my practice, it's just there's a group energy that just uplifts you individually. It's quite remarkable. It's quite profound, and it's quite wonderful.
I've experienced this actually with you, and we'll get into it a little bit later in our catalyst group. But my practice has been solo for a long while. As I mentioned on other podcasts, I got introduced to you during COVID, and I was home a lot meditating by myself, and I got really into it and I enjoyed it, but I was never around other people. We started working together, we got a group together, and then I was like looking around at everybody else meditating, and it did make me more disciplined, actually.
Hmm.
It made me stay with it, but I also sort of, I don't know, I know it's hard through a computer screen, but I felt like I got energy from the other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something, that they were putting out and that I was pulling in. I don't know. Does that make sense?
It definitely makes sense. I mean, it absolutely happens in the meditative context, in the context of the Zendo. I mean, think about a Sixers game. I mean, think of the group energy that actually is there. You talk about I guess it's the sixth man in
Yeah.
basketball, it's the 12th man in soccer, which I play. It's real, right?
Yeah.
The energy of consciousness and heart that gets stirred up is a very real thing. But I want to talk about not only the power in the meditation hall or in, say, the practice space, but also in life, right? It's to have these kind of kindred spirits that are part of your the intentionality of your life. What's important to you is essential. It's absolutely essential to proceed and grow in any way. In any way. I recently was made aware of these kind of studies they've done in group psychology, and they see, like, they bring these people together and they say, just by a flip of a coin, you're on the blue side and you're on the red side. Okay. And then they just literally, they randomly divide the group into these two teams. Right. And then just by that, there's a friendliness and a kinship and a willingness to kind of
Mhm.
trust and connect with those who
Yeah.
are on your team
Yeah.
versus the ones who are on the other team,
Yeah.
and they don't have to be similar in any ways. It's only by virtue of the fact that you've been assigned into that group. So you can recognize that the power of that sort of
Yeah.
group identification. Then you take it out to, like, a fandom, right? I mean, I'm an Arsenal fan in the Premier League, and I just, like, if I meet an Arsenal fan on the street, I'm like
Yeah.
friends with them immediately. You're
Yeah.
friends with a Sixers fan, no matter
Yeah.
where you meet them. That's
Yeah.
real. It's a
Yeah.
real kind of heart and soul connection that's happening when you take that to the level of intentionality around what's most important to you and the way you want to live your life. It is absolutely profound. It's so important to have that support. It's a very deep support because your own sense of yourself is confirmed and validated by other people being interested in the same thing. So I want to really say that, and I want to also point out what happens if we don't have that, right?
Hmm.
Don't have that. If you don't have a community that supports you, you're critically impoverished, and it's really important to find that. And,
Hmm.
we'll talk about groups in a work context, a little bit here too, but it really is important in a work context. If you find yourself in a we're all in groups at work, we're part of the culture of whatever company we're at or organization that we're working in. And if we find ourselves at odds with the people there, it can be extremely alienating, to our souls. It's a very, very almost intolerable position to be in.
You bring up sports, which is always good, and the Philly sports fans are certainly a passionate group, and there is a certain feeling you get when you're in that stadium and everybody's fired up, and even like when the team makes a run, like when the Phillies went to the World Series a couple years ago, like the whole city, there was this everybody, crime went down, and and like people were just in a good mood, and we're talking to each other in the supermarket about the Phillies. And I do think there's that collective energy that you get when you're on the same subject. And I'm curious though, like sometimes you look at it from one group, but there's other groups and other points of views out there. So how important is it to put yourself into different positions, maybe sometimes uncomfortable positions, so that you can feed off of a different type of group and hear a different perspective?
Yeah, it's critically important. It is. I mean, most of us haven't found, necessarily a supportive community. Um, Actually, most of us are probably engaged in communities that we kind of inherited, as the communities that I shouldn't say most. I mean, whoever people are in very different places, but most of us, at least, we learn we participate in the groups that we grow up in, right? So those are the groups that we connect with, and so we kind of share their values, and we share their possibilities, you could say, right? So even people who go to, say, Ivy League schools, they might be exposed to a certain range of
Yeah.
activities, but there's thousands and thousands of paths that are not available,
Mhm.
to an American Ivy League institution. Are you going to become a meditation teacher? Are you going to become a shamanic healer? Are you going to become, an entrepreneur in another country? There's all sorts of things that type of path doesn't apply herself to. As open-minded as we think we are, and meritocratic the way we think we are, we're kind of always embedded in a certain kind of sphere, say a sphere of possibilities, right?
Mhm.
So it's always important to like step out and just expose yourself to
Yeah.
um other groups, other spheres, other values, other ways of being, so that you can see what really resonates for you.
It's a great way to learn from other people too, and I think about different groups that I've been a part of, like my fraternity, for example. I went through the fraternity rushing process and I chose a fraternity, right? And if I had chosen a different one, I would have had a lot of different friends and a different group, and
That's
I
right.
would have been somehow a different person. And then I got out of college and I joined a company, and I had a different group there. And so over the years, you get to be involved with these different groups. And I do agree that you got to take the risk. I don't know if risk is the right word, but just get outside of your comfort zone and really learn from other people. And I think it's hugely beneficial. And I will say that the more that I've gotten to know your friends, and we're going to talk about the Catalyst Group now, that's been amazing. And I really appreciate that you set it up. So tell me about how that came to be and how you chose the people and set that all up.
Yeah, well, I've been working with individuals for a number of years in a coaching capacity, bringing mindful awareness to their professional lives, helping them. And I realized that there was a real opportunity to bring people together to activate this power that we've been talking about right now. By having people talk with each other and share each other's experience, there's this incredible catalyzing force where new possibilities come up around what one might do with one's life. Things that are blocks in one's life, typically most other people have experienced very similar blocks. So to get reflection on those from multiple perspectives, not just from me, but from multiple perspectives. We had men and women in the group. We had what ages went from, I think, 38 to 63, um, a great wealth of experience and diversity of experience. It something catalyzes in that type of work, and it's literally exponentially greater than one-on-one type of guidance. So how did you find it?
I loved it and I really appreciate it. And you did a really great job of selecting these people. I've started to get to know them one-on-one outside of the group, and it's been very helpful because, as you said, they're all expressing things that I'm going through things, and they are too, and we're all being a little bit vulnerable. We're all like sharing like things that were going on, and it's kind of nice to see how other people are dealing with blocks in their life or their work, and how they're using the practice. And we're all being taught by you, the amazing sensei that we have here. But how are you applying what Paul is teaching you to your daily struggles or suffering? And then it's different. Every person's different. And I've learned a few tips and tricks from some of these folks. And I'd love to, keep going with it. So you're going to be doing more of those groups, right?
I will be doing more of those groups. I invite those who are listening to this who might be interested in this to send me an email or fill out my discovery form inquiry on my website. And links, down below, and we can chat about that. I wanted to bring in an aspect of the groups, which as is sort of the framework is the intentionality of the group is super important, right? What are we doing here? And the framework of inquiry that I hold for these groups is to really be clear about our commitments or vows as I talk about them. So this is such it's such like material that's ready for aha moments for everybody when we look at, well, what are my inherited commitments in my relationship life, to my partners? What are my inherited commitments and understandings about work? And what's my inherited kind of understanding about what my life is all about and who I'm supposed to be? And all of us have inherited ideas about those things. But when we investigate and interrogate those inherited ones, and then we consciously express our conscious ones, this is who I want to be. This is what I want to grow into. This is what I want my relationship to be about. This is what I want my work to be about. It's actually easy, it's very easy and inspiring to step in and say, this is what I want to be. And when everybody's doing that together, that's a really joyful process.
You challenged us to bring up our vowels. I really enjoyed that. And one thing that happened with me is one of the times you talked about inherited vowels and you asked us to write some things down, and then we went into breakout rooms, and the other person went first, and I realized that my vows were just very short and not well thought out. And I listened to this other person talk about their work vows, and I'm like, I need to give a little bit more thought to this and open up a little more. And it was also about me being a little bit vulnerable about things that I inherited, and I wasn't being as open as I could have been, and this other person was, and it spurred me on to open up more. And so I really appreciated that.
Yeah, exactly. These groups, they aren't military regiments. These groups are messy. They're meant to be messy. One way of understanding Sangha is like we bring our individual practice into relation. So we have an absolute, dimension, unity dimension, and then we have a relative dimension. And the relative dimension is all of us as individual beings with all of our messy lives. So the groups are always messy. And as long as we have the intention to be messy together, then it can actually be very adventurous and actually very fun, because we're allowing flaws and setbacks and vulnerabilities and mistakes, are all part of the process. That sharing that is actually part of the process. We say, we have this expression in Zen, no mud, no lotus. So I say more mud, more lotus.
Do we really need more mud? But I guess so. I guess we can't avoid it. What the other thing I liked about it too is that I found that I like these people. Like I want to be friends with these people because they're all very spiritual. They're all on some similar path. We're all different, but they're a very likable group of people, and they really wanted to get to know me, and I wanted to get to know them, and that's the power of the group and the community. I've done all of this solo work, and I feel good about it, but I really now feel like I'm going to some other level because of all these other folks.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm happy that I've heard from almost everyone that they've
Yeah.
maintained connections with multiple other people in the group and are doing things together. So that's yeah, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, now we got to figure out how to do it not on Zoom and in person more often, but we're all across the country. But that's another story. Tell me more. I'd love to hear more about the other things that you do out there in Boulder, because every week or two you're doing something cool, retreats and things like that. So what are some of the type of things that you do there?
Yeah, well, I've got the Zen Center, the Young Zen Center, based in Boulder here. So we have weekly talks. We have daily meditation sessions with the group, and then we have monthly retreats that we do out here. And those will be 1 day, 2 day, or 3 day. And I think by the end of the year, actually, I'll be doing multi-day with overnights. 4 or 5, maybe even 7 days by the end of the year. And these are pretty intense meditation retreats. We'll do 6 to 8 hours of meditation a day. We'll have work practice periods doing very mindful meditation, mindful eating. We have some rest periods. And when you do this amount of concentrated meditation, it's very deep. Develop a lot of what's called samadhi, the energy of concentration. It becomes
Hmm.
very, very pleasurable, actually.
And what about like centers, like monasteries or Zen centers, and what kind of things that they offer that would be helpful?
Well, different monasteries have different facilities and offerings where you can do overnight and really be immersed in their community for a period of time. So I've spent time in some of those places, but there's a variety of places across the country that can allow you to, go in deeper. I'll go ahead and give a very anticipatory plug to a retreat that I've been enlisted to be the major meditation leader of. This is a fellow who is studies with one of my teachers in my lineage, and has also an extensive connection in with the corporate mindfulness world. So he's presenting and offering to the corporate mindfulness world, and he feels like there's the readiness for people to do overnights in corporate mindfulness, which has been probably an edge that not many people have kind of taken that leap yet, but he feels that there's the interest to that. So I'll be doing that. I think October will be the date. It'll be up in the Northwest, up, I believe, in the Portland area. And that's an opportunity to do, really a lot of dedicated meditation practices, but outside of a Buddhist context. So, no bells and bows, as we say, but still a real strong meditative practice. So there's things like that are emergent forms as well.
Yeah, and we've actually spoken to a few groups. One was the fishing, the fly fishing company, and then the wilderness retreats, where they are combining the corporate, work, bringing your team together in some cool spot. And the thing that we want to do is bring the mindfulness and the meditation into those corporate settings. And the theory is you're there working on team camaraderie and bringing your team together, and now you're bringing in the spirituality too. So, hopefully you come out of it as a closer unit, but also individually can gain something from all the teaching.
Yeah, exactly. And talking about Sangha and the power of Sangha and the importance of being aligned with the intentionality, the corporate mindfulness, it's going to be impactful to the extent that the culture is really embracing the practice and the values of a mindfulness practice. So it can't be lip service or just kind of automatic. There has to be a real commitment to the deeper aspects of a meditation practice, which involve surrendering control, being open and vulnerable, deeply listening to other people, having benevolent, beneficial thoughts towards other people, that has to be embedded within the context of the group, activity.
I think it's so important when you're building a company culture. One of my previous companies, we had these offsite meetings like once or twice a year. My partner had a house at the Jersey Shore, and we would all go down and hang out for 2 days, and we would work during the day, but then we would eat and have a few drinks and hang out on the beach. And it was really important for us to all just get together as a group, sit in the same room and just talk and not work on our computers and be on our phones. And I just thought that those were really essential for the culture of the company.
Mm-hmm.
I've also been in companies where culture wasn't as big as a factor, and it really caused problems over time. So I think that this group benefit helps you build your team and succeed,
Yeah, exactly. And what you just said, where culture wasn't as important. Well, like we were saying before, there's always a culture. There's always a culture. A plant doesn't grow outside of soil. Agriculture is kind of the model here, right? Everything is growing in something, in a field of nutrition. So every company has a culture. Now, if they're not conscious of it, then they've probably inherited some kind of standard business culture from American capitalism. It's likely inherited some kind of a autopilot culture, that they've inherited. But every organization has a culture, and the more conscious you are and more intentional you are about it, the more powerful and positive it's going to be.
Yeah, I think it's super important, and it's also but the individual work. See, the other thing that I like about what we've been doing is the more that I focused on my vows and my intentions, then the next day when I had a work meeting, I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about like, okay, my intention is to do this with this project or something else. So the work that we did in the group, it had benefits the next day or the next week. And so that's what I like about like learning from the other people and getting that lift. How do you, what is that lift? What happens where you're kind of a better person the next day?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. My goal is fulfillment. I want people to be fulfilled in their work and in their lives. And there's a lot of counter forces to that fulfillment. Um, one of them is having a lack of clarity around what your commitments are in your life. So oftentimes, you may have a commitment to your family that is getting in the way of you clarifying your commitment to your work, or there's a conflict between those, or a challenge between those. So likewise in your relationship life, to your partner, or to your spiritual practice, it can be very challenging to maintain all of these dimensions of your life. And what we tend to do, because we are called upon to grow in all of these areas, is we kind of check out maybe of one of them, and we just say, okay, I'm not going to really be that conscious of that one over there. I'm just going to work color by numbers, maybe is a way to put it.
Yeah.
And that's bypassing, right? So bypassing is going to lead you to not be fulfilled, because you're just pushing that into the unconscious, and you're not aware of really what you want to get out of it. What I really want to help people with is to just bring to consciousness what is most important to them, and then give them ways to practice that path in
Mm-hmm.
all of those areas in a way that's really balanced. And that will lead to fulfillment, which is
Mm-hmm.
more important than any kind of success metrics, just to be really
Yeah.
fulfilled, feel that your life is meaningful and significant.
I think about different things that I've done over the years to sort of change those groups that I'm in. And one of the things that comes up was I love live music. I'm a deadhead, and I've been to a lot of jam band shows and festivals. And when I get into that scene where there's 20,000, 30,000 people that are all just fans of the band and the collective energy, and we sometimes spend a couple days together, and I've made so many friends because they're like me, they're cool people, they're smart, they're funny, they're interested in the music, and I've over the years made, I don't know, 20 or 30 new friends
Mhm.
just by going to music festivals. And once this happened once or twice, I'm like, I feel really good when I'm around these folks. I just need to, note to self, come back next time,
Mhm.
and I started going to more of them. And I've realized that's just super important for me to put myself into that situation with those
Mhm.
type of people, because I'm comfortable and they're like me. And so it's really interesting.
Do you find that that inspires you to do kind of, good work in the world or to share
Yeah.
that love with other people?
Yes.
Yeah.
100%. There's so much love in that group. It's really pretty amazing. Like, where people are just friendly and nice to each other, and you develop these bonds. And, there's always a week or two after I get back from something like that, I'm still on some sort of buzz from it.
Mhm.
It's just really an energy that I get from it. And also the opposite is true when I haven't gone away and seen my friends and done that for a while. Like, I miss it. I miss that kind of atmosphere. So
Mhm.
there's a clear benefit to me by being in that group.
Yeah, that's really, it's special. It's special to recognize that, something is being opened up in your heart, this love in
Yeah.
this, tribal, uh, I don't know what you would call it, this um, group, group spirit, group uplift that happens with that those type of music concerts. And, to the extent that you kind of keep it to yourself as a private experience, then you could just be on the hedonic treadmill of just continually wanting to have more and more pleasurable experiences. But I hear you not saying that it's actually it's something you want to share. It's something
Yeah.
you want to share that energy more out. And that's the important thing, is to share it, because it's worth saying that our culture has a kind of a shadow of this hedonic treadmill. Have you heard that expression?
No.
Right? It's like there's kind of a vast alienation, that our culture can impose on us. It's very materialistic, right? There aren't well understood rites of passage or initiations. We don't have a good elder wisdom, kind of respect for elderly wisdoms, all sorts of reasons why our culture is a little bit, off. Um, and for lack of those sources of wisdom and spiritual nourishment, we can get on a very materialistic, just pleasure seeking life, right? There's always more. There's more money, more drugs, more experiences, more pleasure, more, better restaurants we can go to, more travel we can do, right? It becomes this hedonic treadmill of more, 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 more. And that's a horrible, form of suffering, right? That's the really, I don't care if you're a billionaire and you have to get the second yacht because the first one isn't enough, or you're constantly needing, delicious meals, and that's a fucking nightmare, man. You're in
Yeah.
hell as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of that in our culture. We get trapped into that. So the important thing I think I'd like to bring out here in the context of this group is that groups can create great joy, and it's it's not about a personal experience of pleasure. It's actually about expanding and extending the love that comes from that to even more and more people.
Yeah, no, I've felt it a lot of times, and I think it's also imperative to just open up your mind to new things, new groups, and meeting new people. And that's why I also love what we're doing. It's relatively new for me, and I'm really enjoying it. And it sort of made me think about: is there a place in Philly here that I can go and join a sangha, and go on some sort of retreat locally and meet people around here? And I'm looking them up and trying to find some things. So the more that I've gotten the benefit out of it, the more I want to experience new things.
Exactly. Very good. And I'm going to get you out here to Boulder to do a retreat
Yeah.
sooner or later. Come on, podcast listeners, tell Scott to come out and do a retreat.
I know. I got a lot of reasons to come to Boulder, and it's Philly is it's not exactly the same in terms of like spiritual center of things like it is there, but there's still plenty of people. It's just you don't know. I don't know them really. Like I have to like seek them out, just like you would seek out people of a club that you want to join. And so I encourage everybody, just be open-minded and join different groups and learn from other people. And there's a lot of benefit from it.
Yeah, check them out. We do have these blinders. We don't know
Yeah.
what's right under our noses sometimes. There's all sorts of great, Buddhist groups and Zen groups and all the major cities and some smaller cities all through the US. So yeah, if you're intrigued by, this particular practice, look for what's local. You can also check out my Eon Zen Center, eonzen.org. We have a lot of online and virtual material too.
Yeah, that's great. So anything else? What's coming up next for you? What are your next couple events and groups that you're putting together there?
Let's see. Well, I am developing a group that'll start probably in the next 6 weeks or so. I'm shooting. So I'm taking applications for that and inquiries into that now. And I'm proceeding with my one-on-one programs. I've got a 1-month karmic accelerator program, which I've put out last week. If you'd like to do a 1-month program with me, and then I've got my standard 3-month program that I'm taking new people in now as well. And then we've got things going on in the Zen Center, which you can look at eonzen.org. We've got monthly events there.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, this has been great conversation, Paul. Any closing thoughts for today?
No, I really appreciate it, Scott. You're part of my Sangha. You're part of my people. And I really appreciate you.
I do. I appreciate you too. And you've done an amazing job of opening my mind up to the power of all this. I really appreciate that. And also your Zen at Work newsletters. I love reading them and encourage everyone to sign up there. But it's just sort of like I started off on this journey kind of just reading my books by myself. Then I met you, and now I've met other people. And it's just like I really feel like my knowledge base is expanding and also making new friends. So I appreciate it.
Great.
Awesome. Well, this has been a great episode. As usual, check us out on anywhere you get your podcast. Contact Paul for some coaching. Sign up for his newsletter, and we will see you again soon with a new episode. Thanks again, Paul.
Take care.
Thank you for joining us on this exploration into Zen Buddhism and its transformative influence on work and life. We hope you'll subscribe, share, and comment wherever you get your podcasts. May your journey be one of continuous growth and mindful living. From all of us here at Game of Zen, wishing you peace and prosperity on your path ahead.